So I've given a title to this last segment. I call it UFOs as a Gateway to Self-Discovery. This is not really a completely new theme. I've talked about this before. A lot of other people have talked about this type of thing before too. If you go back through the history of what we call the UFO phenomenon, particularly when the subject sort of exploded onto public consciousness in the 1940s, when they were called flying saucers, there were basic questions that people would ask. Like, who are they? What are they? What do they want? Are they a threat? Are they helpful to us? Do they like us? Do they not like us? All of these ideas were basically focused on the other, this other, whatever this other was. Aliens, extraterrestrials, interdimensional entities, whatever they were. What we typically found back in those days is that the questions were always on what are they? I'm sure this is a very normal kind of reaction. Along with that, and this I think is particularly interesting, our questions about them usually focused on, like our scientific questions about them, usually focused on what I would call like a kind of traditional materialistic science. So that is, like, how do their craft operate? Do they operate within our normal understanding of physics? So, like, what is their propulsion system? What is their developments in material science? Do they use fancy rockets? Do they use other exotic materials? So, in other words, I think the early way of looking at these flying saucers was looking at their science as slightly more advanced extensions of our own science, essentially conforming to our own materialistic preconceptions. In fact, it's very important to do this. We want to know. We would want to know everything that we can know about them. We would want to know everything that we can about their science, about their biology, about their intentions, all of that. Yes, absolutely. However, is there something about them that tells us something important about us? I would suggest the answer to that is yes. We may have a lot of questions to ask about this and maybe not a lot of answers, but I think good questions are important in our life. I think we should always be asking good questions, even if we are not assured of definitive answers. So we can ask ourselves, is there evidence that they made us in some manner? That they tweaked us in some manner? And if that is the case, what would that say about us? Does it mean that they own us, or do they think they own us? Or that maybe we're some highly valued specimen, or some highly valued life form? Or does it mean that we're being used by them in some manner? I don't have answers to any of these things. I don't even know if we were made by another advanced species or not. I would say that when you look at the path of what we call human evolution, it's very unusual. It's really quite a unique path indeed. If you follow the standard evolutionary theory, which I basically do, then you're talking millions of years of a kind of like a primitive ape-like creature, Australopithecus, of course, basically an upright chimpanzee, essentially. And really only within less than the last million years is there any official evidence of what we would call modern-looking human beings. And really, officially speaking, in the last quarter of a million years, essentially, is when we start seeing human beings that are definitively like us. So if that is true, and some people would say that's a big if, but let's just say it's true, then human evolution is unlike the evolution of any other animal species that I can imagine, that I can think of. There are no other examples of such rapid evolution. What would cause such a rapid transformation in the physical characteristics of a species, or the transmutation of one species into something totally different? If not, is it possible that we were worked in some way or another? Right? All I'm just doing is speculating here. But even more to the point, what do the non-physical, non-material elements of this phenomenon say about us? In other words, think about the ability of UFOs to become invisible. Simple. Happens all the time. Happened to me one time. I had a UFO sighting in 1999, and the damn thing just disappeared. I looked away for 1 second, and it just went away. And there are many of these cases, many of them very, very good, solid cases, where the object just is there, and then it's not there. Do they disappear? Now you can say, well, maybe they have cloaking technology, and it's not all that outrageous. Okay, but what about the ability, discussed time and again, of people with abduction experiences going through walls or going through solid objects? And, you may not like this. This may not accord with your definition of material science, but these claims keep coming and coming and coming. What if they're true? Maybe they are true. I think they are. So what does it say, then, that a solid human being, or seemingly solid human being, can go through a wall, go through a ceiling? These other beings able to manipulate reality in such a way that they do. And what about their ability to communicate with us telepathically? Because every single claim of contact with these other beings involves telepathic communication. Aliens are not just flapping their gums talking to us, they're getting into our heads in some way. So what does that say about us and about our reality? Or their apparent ability to communicate with each other in that manner. And I'm thinking of a very detailed conversation I had with one abductee who was actually written about in one of John Mack's books from the 90s, who talked to me about how these other beings, the gray aliens he was talking about, having kind of like a beehive-like mind, where they are all aware of each other's thoughts. They don't have any conception of privacy the way that we would think of it. They all literally know each other's thoughts. But the fact is that if they are able to communicate with us telepathically, even if in this case, according to this witness, they have to slow themselves down to an almost painful extent, but they can do it, what does all of that say about us and our reality? What I'm suggesting here is that it's not that their science is merely an advanced extension of our own science. I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's that their science is qualitatively, not quantitatively, qualitatively beyond our materialistic scientific conceptions of the world. Somehow, they are at a totally different level of manipulating reality, and it's a reality that is beyond the kind of dead mechanistic conceptions that our scientists seem to perceive the world. We have some scientists now who are talking a little bit more and more about things like non-locality, and a few brave souls out there talking about what people in other eras would call the ether. And again, I mentioned earlier in this program that I came back from Greece from what was fundamentally a conference about Wilhelm Reich, who talked about orgone. And I'm not a Reich expert, but I've read a little bit about Reich. And I think orgone is a kind of another variation of ether. It's this other idea, that there's a living kind of substrate to our reality in which we exist, like an invisible ocean, basically. If that's true, then, and maybe it is true, if it's true, then these beings very likely are operating with a very, very radically different conception of the nature of reality than what we are operating in. And so I think that this indicates that by us continuing to study this phenomenon, we are very likely to revolutionize our own understanding of what is the very nature of reality. That's what I think. Another thing that we have to ask ourselves is if they have the ability to do all of these things, that is, go through walls or simply vanish, like in the case of the The famous Peter Corey case in Australia from the early 1990s, where this man wakes up and there are these two alien-seeming human hybrid type female beings at the foot of his bed who simply vanish, leaving him with definite physical evidence that was taken to a laboratory. If they can just vanish like that, then do we, humans, have the ability to do these types of things? Do we have the ability, or will we have the ability, through power of the mind or power of our being, to do the kinds of things that these ETs or these other beings seemingly are able to do? You know, the ability to vanish, the ability to communicate telepathically, the ability to float people, to move them through solid objects. These are what we would call truly superpowers that exist in the world of fantasy or in the ancient gods or what have you. But is it possible that we actually do have these abilities? The ability to exercise total neurological control over another being simply via power of the mind, as again is evidenced in many of these cases of apparent abduction or contact by these other beings. And we might ask ourselves, what would it be like if we were to have such abilities? Whether through the development of our own brain or through technology that is probably right around the corner, to be able to vanish, to have superpowers, to be able to materialize or disappear at will. I don't really know. I mean, I'm not sure that we are gifted with the maturity as of yet to handle such powers if we were to have them. Maybe we do. Maybe it would actually just be like an ordinary part of human civilization another century or two from now. And maybe people of the future might just look back on us and think, yeah, you know, they lived a very primitive life. They can't do the things that we can do. And it's very possible that, you know, our great-grandchildren will live in that kind of reality, and it'll be a totally normal reality. Maybe they will live in a completely transhuman, post-human kind of a world in which good old-fashioned unenhanced Homo sapiens like myself just don't exist anymore, where everyone's been enhanced and upgraded in some way or another. I don't know if I would actually want to live in such a world, to be honest with you, but of course I'm a creature of this time, this place, this body, this mind. But again, back to my theme, UFOs as a gateway to self-discovery. You know, ultimately, when we think about this subject, this technology, these beings, we have to do it within the context of our own minds, our own thinking, our own society. And that means essentially what we learn about in terms of these other beings is only going to be valuable in terms of how it affects and hopefully improves us. If learning about a highly advanced, or at least technologically advanced species that is here interacting with us in some important way, if that doesn't make us better, then what is the point of doing this? I'm not any longer interested in a purely dispassionate search for the truth if it doesn't make me into a better person than I was before. To me, that's much more important. So my feeling is, let's study this subject, looking for the truth. We have to look for the truth always, but keeping in mind that, you know, we look for the truth because it's supposed to set us free. And we want to study these other beings, we want to study this other technology as a way to understand what we are. For example, if we learn, as I suspect, that at least some of these other beings are not truly naturally occurring biological entities, but rather are artificially developed, maybe grown. And if that is so, then I would bet a lot of money that they do not have our emotional type of being. They're not like us emotionally. That I'm not saying they don't have emotions, but I'm saying, or I'm suggesting they don't have the kinds of emotions that we would have. If you're grown rather than born, if you're raised in a certain way but not nursed at your mother's breast, that makes you different psychologically. Whatever they are, they're different than we are. And by understanding them, we can have, I think, a better sense of who we are and what we are. And the one thing I really hope that we keep in mind, if we do get to a post-disclosure world in our lifetime, and I essentially think that that is likely, although I can't pretend that I know for sure, but if we do get to that point, I really hope that we remind ourselves of some of the great things of which we are capable. You know, in the history of human civilization, when a highly advanced, technologically advanced culture meets a less technologically advanced culture and basically wipes it out, what you often see is kind of depression and a lack of self-confidence that can often happen with the dominated culture. Happened in Central and South America, North America, 500 years ago. Happened around much of the rest of the world when the Europeans basically just took over. And, you know, if we are faced with the definitive existence of a highly advanced, very sophisticated species, I hope that it does not cause humans to lose self-confidence in what they are and what their destiny can be. I have a feeling that there's some very, very special things about us, and that we might just be able to find a better perspective on them through a continued exploration of this UFO reality, and in a potential post-disclosure world, the recognition of these other life forms by comparing ourselves to them. I think that we can find a lot that's valuable about who we are and what we are. I've never agreed with some of the critics who disparage the human race and say, why would aliens be interested in us, we primitives who can't get our own act together? I mean, it's true, we are primitive and we are violent and we can't get our act together. That's all true, but if there's one thing I'll always believe in, it's in the value, the potential amazing value of every human being that lives on this planet. We have incredible potential, and every now and then you see someone come along and they fulfill that potential, and it's an amazing thing. So we've got something very special. The problem that we're faced with isn't what we are as a species. The problem we're faced with is a really screwed up power structure and a kind of derailment from what we are meant to be as a civilization that is keeping us from achieving our greatest potential. That's our problem. The problem really isn't us as individuals. I think as individuals, we're overall pretty cool, pretty good, very interesting. We have tremendous ability and potential. We have gotten stuck in a hierarchical system of control that, maybe by design, I think is preventing the vast majority of people from having the ability to explore their own potential, their own higher selves. And it keeps us divided from ourselves and from each other. So my guess is that an extraterrestrial or alien species or some type of other that's observing us, I'll bet they're aware of this. I'll bet they are aware of our amazing potential. And probably of some amazing, unique gifts that we have. You know, I talked about telepathy earlier. I believe in that. I have not really done any remote viewing myself, but I don't really need to be persuaded of that. I know remote viewers, quite a few of them at this point. That is for real. And the fact that people can do remote viewing tells me that probably everyone can do remote viewing. And what that means is that we've got a native ability inside ourselves right now. This is just one thing. We have a native ability that is not being promoted, that is not being discussed, and that is significant. It's absolutely significant. That's one ability that's basically locked away by the stupid ideologies of our world that tell us such things are not possible. There are probably dozens and scores and hundreds of other abilities that we have within us that are similarly locked away by really stupid, primitive ideologies that keep us divorced from our true reality, our true nature. So, one thing I have seen about the UFO phenomenon in the 20 plus years that I've been studying it is that it leads us to the leading edge of so many cutting, leading, important questions of our world. And I believe that by delving into this topic, we're actually helping ourselves explore some of these cutting-edge scientific issues about ourselves and understanding the true nature of what we are. And another reason I think that this is the case is that, the UFO subject is truly a fringe. It's not respectable. Our officially sanctioned culture, pushes it aside and says this is not for serious minds. And so you've got to be brave to study it to begin with. But once you throw yourself into it, what you find is that it actually opens up so many intellectual vistas that it is a gateway to self-discovery in that sense as well. You learn that there is a reality that is being denied by our official power structure, and that keys you in to something very, very important, and you start asking. You develop the habit of asking what other things about our reality are being withheld from me. So that's another aspect in which UFOs are a key element in self-discovery. And it's really the reason that after all these years and all the annoyances and difficulties and frustrations that I've had in this crazy topic, that I stay with it. I think that it is very probably the single most revolutionary subject that is available in the world today. I think it offers the most potential for mind-opening expansion. And it also offers perhaps the greatest opportunity for developing personal courage in one's life, because it is so forbidden even now. And for those people who have a natural innate curiosity, it probably offers some of the most fertile territory for exploration. A lot of reasons that the UFO subject is a prime tool for human self-discovery. I would encourage you to throw yourself into it for a while. I would say, if you do it, you better have some persistence, some perseverance, and you better be brave, and you better be strong, because it will shake the foundations of any previous paradigm that you have going into it. Be prepared for that. Be prepared to float for a long time before you step on solid ground, if you ever even do. We pursue the truth not because it makes our lives easier, but we pursue the truth because it makes our lives better. That's what I would say. So, with that, I think it is time to say goodnight. I want to thank my producer, Mr. Race Hobbs. I want to thank the good people in the chat room, and I want to thank you on the other end of this connection. I'm Richard Dolan. Looking forward to the next time I'm with you. Now, stay tuned for 3 hours of Fade to Black featuring KGRA's Jimmy Church. Good night.